Our last speaker is Hanine Hassan. I'm extremely pleased also to have her here. She has come a long way from Gaza, and it has taken her 32 days only to be here with us and to come out of Gaza. She will talk to us about the legal side and also link the issues. So,
thank you.
You have the floor.
I would like to start by saying that your presence today is actually a living proof that people have not forgotten, the young have not forgotten and will not forget their right of return. It has been a while and still people are here demanding their right to return. It means that today, just as myself, being a refugee, I'm a fourth generation Palestinian refugee from grandparents that fled Palestine in 1948, ending up in refugee camps in the Gaza Strip, having one generation after the other, being born as a refugee, being registered at the UNRWA, the United Nations Work and Relief Agency. It means that the problem is still here, even though many organizations refuse to see it. And of course Israel, who has tried with borders and wars and attacks and ethnic cleansing and different cards, we as Palestinians within the occupied territories are referred to by red cards and blue cards and green cards, each one to define us, which kind of refugee we are, into which piece of land we are entitled to. So Israel has played a big role in what my colleagues have just explained, the fact that we are put in categories of refugees for Israel within the occupied Palestinian territories, within the state of Israel, and in the neighboring countries. I will be talking about the legal side of our refugee problem in order to help you, because it's a very technical piece. I have a PowerPoint presentation in the back. And if you cannot follow with an article, you will find it written. So I will start with the very first and most important thing. Why the UNRWA, which is the United Nations Work and Relief Agency that was created specially for the Palestinian refugees, to absorb the Palestinian refugees, in their definition, they only recognize Palestinian refugees as persons whose normal place of residence was Palestine between June 1946 and May 1948. So that is 2 years, and the people who lost their homes and means of livelihoods as a result of the 1948 war and the loss of Palestine. This means that a huge segments of Palestinian refugees that do not fall under this definition. And actually the crime that was committed at that time by the Zionists in 1947, it was colonization and expulsion that was taking place simultaneously. So basically, they had to colonize the land and they had to drive away the people. And more than 500 Palestinian villages were depopulated and later destroyed to prevent the return of the refugees. So these people are taken by UNRWA. Unfortunately, we have another law, which is the refugee law, the United Nations Conventions relating to the status of refugee. I will not read it, it is there, you can find it back, it's Article 1A. It states what a refugee, or it defines what a refugee is. So it's a person who lost his country and has no protection basically and cannot return to the place of the place he left from the first time. But most Palestinians do not fall under this definition. So the Palestinians of 1948 and 1967 do not fall under the Article 1A. And this is the gap that Magda was also referring to. Fortunately, we have UNRWA, but you also have refugee law, and Palestinians are actually kept in a limbo. The UNRWA mandate does not give us protection. It is only a recognition. And we do not fall under the refugee law, which could give us the extreme or the full protection. If you want to understand more about this issue, for those who are doing research on this topic, I would like to refer you to the Badil website, and you will find a huge amount of information on this thing. Then there is another section about Palestinians. We are not only refugees, we are also internally displaced. That means that once the land was taken and conquered, the Israelis had to make sure that Palestinians would never be able to return to Palestine by military means. While expelling those who remained through several ways, they has caused the internal displacement of others that still remained in the land. And so, according to the guiding principle on internal displacement, people who are, or groups of persons who have been forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence, in particular as a result of or in order to avoid the effects of armed conflict, which applies to Palestinians. So what Israel does is she creates a problem of refugees, takes the people out of the country, and then there's the people who remain, they displace them to other areas. And simultaneously, in 1950, Israel decreed a law of return for Jews. So that meant that she gave the Jews the right to colonize Palestine, and the right to Palestinians not to return was taken. So it means that for the arrival of one Jewish person, a Palestinian had to be expelled. This is what we today have to face and endure. There is a map that could show you how Palestinians, how the population of Palestine was transferred in 1948 during the 2 years that UNRWA recognizes. So approximately 800,000 Palestinian refugees were displaced beyond the borders of the new state of Israel to the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. And if you look at the arrows, you will see the flow of people. The thicker the arrow, the more people that fled. You will see that, for instance, from the city of Jaffa, where I come from, the families have mostly fled to either the Gaza Strip or Egypt. And there's one flow of people that left to the north to Lebanon. And these arrows, actually, we still live them. In my camp in the Gaza Strip, which is the second biggest camp, the people that are there are most of them from Jaffa. We are regrouped in our camps by our cities of origins. And this is how we know that we came somewhere from. I might have never seen Jaffa, but I still have papers that say that I'm from that place. My refugee camp and the people around me, it is as if small cities have disappeared in Israel, but were somehow figuratively recreated inside refugee camps. So you find your neighbors, those that survived, you find them back in the same place. Also in the Nakba, 150,000 Palestinians remained in the areas of Palestine that became the state of Israel. It means that those are what we call today, or what are referred to, are Arab Israelis or Palestinian Israelis. These people have refused or did not or choose to die in their homes and decided to stay during the creation of the State of Israel. Today they are almost 1.1 million people, and from the original amount, around 40,000 of these people were internally displaced. It means that Israel refused to allow these IDPs, these internally displaced people, to return to their home and villages. It means that during the war, someone who was from Jaffa, who was afraid and fled to Jaffa, to Haifa, wanted to return after the creation of Israel, the state of Israel, and Israel just say, you are no longer welcome, you have to stay in the place you went to. Also, as a result of the Nakba, it is estimated that approximately 50% fled under the assault of Zionist forces before even the creation of the State of Israel. And so in 1948, 85% of Palestinians living in what is now the State of Israel became refugees. Even though they carry an Israeli passport, originally they are refugees. But today the State of Israel considers them as second-grade citizens. They don't have the full the full rights as Israelis. Another important aspect is that the villages that many Palestinians come from were depopulated, which is also a crime, and they were destroyed to prevent the return of the refugees. And those are 500 villages. It is as if Geneva, with its population, first we take the population out, then we bomb Geneva to make sure that the people who fled cannot have a place to return to. And this is what Israel did. So in the districts of Jaffa, Ramla, Bir al-Saba, not one Palestinian was left standing, completely destroyed. You can see the dots of all the villages that were destroyed within the state of Israel. Then, after 1948 until 1966, there was an Israeli military rule of the occupied. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there is a military rule of the remaining territories, which is the entire state of Israel. There was an internal displacement taking place. So people who tried to return were prohibited; they could not return. And according also, Israeli officials transferred Palestinians from one village to another within the borders of the state in order to facilitate colonization of these areas. And Israeli military laws aim to displace Palestinians and confiscate their land. And I can tell you out of experience, they are really good at it. If they can't get you by the law, they will get you by force. So you are literally most of the time powerless in front of the state of Israel. They have laws that prohibit your return and facilitate the return of the Jews. In 1967, a war took place, another one, which was a disaster for those who were remaining. The Palestinian population was transferred and internally displaced again. Over 400,000 Palestinians, approximately 35% of the population of the West Bank, Eastern Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip were expelled from these places. So this meant Israel was pushing the remaining Palestinian out of its territory as it considers it. So those who had to stay, like my family, we fled in 1948 to the Gaza Strip. Then in 1967, people were attacked again and had to flee again. Some of them fled to Jordan, others fled to Egypt. Villages such as Latrun and Jerusalem were completely destroyed, and many other refugee camps as well. And half of those who were expelled were refugees from 1948. The idea, actually, is ongoing displacement. Since 1948 until this day, Palestinians and the refugees and their children are suffering from an ongoing displacement. And the idea behind it is maximum land under exclusive Jewish-Israeli control. It means that you can only live in the state of Israel if you fulfill the Jewish-Israeli exclusiveness note. And that is a very racist concept. It only entitles land to a certain population or certain nationality. It means that concentration areas of Palestinians within Israel are mostly concentrated in certain areas, and everything else, they view it as a threat to the state of Israel. An example of that, and this is happening this year, this is happening actually now, and we are being very active in trying to fight it, is the Naqab. The Naqab is within Israel. Bedouins live there, Palestinian Bedouins, and what is happening is the total displacement of these people. Israel wants to take the land of these people and they are pushing them away. So Israel wants the Naqab, they want to build it, they just want to seize it and take it from the Palestinian, it's within its borders. As I just said, because Palestinian Bedouins are not exclusively Jewish Israelis, for them it's reason enough to displace them. And you can see that it falls under the Power Plan, and it consists of the exclusion of 80,000 Palestinian Bedouins in the Israeli territory. This is happening in 2013. Another kind of displacement is qalqilya. I'm sure you know, I'm not going to go into the details of how Israel built the wall, the separation wall, and how it built it in such a way that they split villages, which means that they had to exclude certain population from certain areas and displace Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Israeli territories from their originally homes and villages. So the displacement of Palestinians is very much until this moment, and the UN knows about it. There are international laws that prohibit it. Unfortunately, it is not stopped. Another kind of displacement is the Palestinian territory occupied by Israel since 1967. The Palestinians that live there have had to suffer war, house demolitions, revocation of residency rights in Jerusalem, and construction of the illegal Jewish settlements, as well as the wall and its associated regime. So even in the 1967 borders, which are, according to international law and the Oslo Accord, should fall under the state of Palestine, Israel is still annexating land and displacing people. Over 105,000 people, IDPs, in the West Bank and the Gaza were there in 2008-2009 before the Israeli operation in Gaza. So we are talking 4 years ago, there were 105,000 Palestinian internally displaced. And in the West Bank, the number is much, much higher. Another aspect of how vulnerable the refugees are, this is a picture of a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, Nahr al-Barid. Palestinian refugees in the neighboring countries have no mandate of protection. I will explain that now. And so they are very vulnerable to the political situation of the countries that receive them. In Nahr al-Barid in 2007, there were an internal crisis between two Lebanese fractions, and some of the people involved escaped in the camp, and so the Lebanese army decided to basically attack the camp, and people were displaced again from Nahr al-Barid. They had to flee to other Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. So it's very much ongoing. To give you some numbers, in total there are 4.5 million Palestinian refugees in 1948, since 1948, and registered under the UNRWA, the UN Relief and Work Agency. There are another 1.5 million Palestinian refugees displaced in 1948, but not registered for assistance. And another 950,000 in 67, and an estimation of 338,000 internally displaced Palestinians within the state of Israel. This makes the overall refugee population, Palestinian population, to 9.8 million refugees. The Palestinians are the largest and longest standing single group of refugees in the world. It means that almost 2 in 5 Palestinians are refugees. So when I'm in a room with 5 Palestinians, I know that one of them is not a refugee, and all of us are refugees. And it's also for the Palestinians here in the room. I am a refugee in the Gaza Strip. I have a colleague here who is a refugee within Israel. I have another colleague who is a refugee in Jordan, and another one who
displaced from 1967.
Displaced since 1967. Each one of us has his own refugee status, and we don't know each other, but we do once we meet. The first question we ask each other is, Palestini min wain? Palestini, where from? Not Palestinian, you're Palestinian from Palestine. No, you're a Palestinian, but from which refugee country? And this is how we connect to one another. And it has become part of our daily struggle. It's a disaster, to be honest. So the international community continues to classify children and grandchildren of Palestinian refugees as refugees. That is why, even though I was not born in 1948, I am, despite still a refugee, I'm entitled to international assistance and protection and reparation in the same time. I have had none of them. The situation will remain until all the new generation of Palestinian refugees and IDPs have access to durable solution in accordance with international law. And the same approach is applied by the international community to other refugee situations in the war, such as Bosnia and Guatemala. When Bosnia happened and the Guatemala people escaped, they were entitled to return and were also provided with solutions that they could choose from. Where are refugees today? My colleagues talked about this. We are everywhere. Name it, where we are there. I even discovered that there are Palestinians in Somalia, in Djibouti, in countries you don't even know how they got there. Like, it's insane. The solutions for the Palestinian problem, there are three. And there are three that are recognized by the international community. Durable solutions, which are either rehabilitation, resettlement, or return or repatriation. These are the three solutions that the UN applies to every refugee community in the world. It has been applied before and it's still being applied, but they refuse to do it for Palestinians. Return, property restitution, and compensation are part of a durable solution. None of them have been offered to Palestinians, particularly in the case where refugees have been victims of population transfer, which is ethnic cleansing in the case of Palestine. International law that protects Palestinian refugee rights. We can find it the right of return, as the common term has become. Our right of return is hard to refute. It can be found among others in the following resolutions and laws: the UN resolution, the international human rights law, the international humanitarian law, the law of state succession, and the international criminal law. I have the articles if some are interested. The UN Security Council Resolution 237 calls on Israel to allow the immediate return of all who have fled the hostilities. Then there is the Resolution 194 of 1948, who resolved that the refugees be allowed to return to their homes at the earliest practicable date, and that compensation be paid to those choosing not to return and for loss or damage of property. So the resolutions are here. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 8, Article 13, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 2, Article 12, Article 5, Article 6. It's not a lack of laws. You have the 4th Geneva Convention, the excerpt from Article 49 could also be applied on Palestinians, Articles 74, 91, International Law Commission articles on national state succession. It's not a lack of laws. It's not that people don't know about the Palestinian refugee problem. It's just that there is a lack of international goodwill to solve the problem. Palestinians should be able to choose to be compensated, to be actually just recognized as human beings that deserve, after so much pain, to go back home. It's a choice, but none of these choices have been given to me. None of these choices, either return or be compensated or giving me a third option, none of it have been put on the table to be discussed with Palestinians. The only thing that has happened is a complete refusal of Israel of the right of return. So you don't give solution, but you also refuse to talk about it. And the problem is still there and still happening. I have to think of the time, but just to tell you that the right of return it's not a myth, it's not impossible, it's not what Israel is selling to the world, that there's no place on the land. There's enough place to absorb every single Palestinian refugees in the state of Israel. Simply since the 90s, Israel has absorbed over 1 million new Jewish immigrants from the former Soviet Union. There is a Palestinian professor, Dr. Salman Abu Sitta, who has done a study, and has showed that logistically it is possible for every Palestinian to return to his home, as it doesn't, the place is there. You can replace people to other places without threatening the Jewish community in Israel. So it is feasible. It is not impossible, as Israel is actually proclaiming. But the importance of maintaining the Jewish character of the state is actually what is prohibiting the right of return. And in other terminology, it is also called as racism and apartheid, because you refuse someone his right to return because of his race and religion. And the importance in this case for Israel to maintain a Jewish majority is more important than the life of all of these refugees. So Israel, to do that, has institutionalized discrimination and racism to maintain dominance of Jewish Israel over the state of Palestine. Basically, the right of return is not about going back in time. Return is much more about the future. We're not going back, it's actually going a step forward into resolving this problem. It is really about starting to live and answering a deep sense of belonging to the land from which refugees were taken, and about building relations between Palestinians and Jews that are based on justice and equality. So it's not a myth, it's feasible if we can just accept it, and if there's an international will to apply it. So it only has to do with logistics and goodwill. That's it. Thank you.